Hey, Ben here with Studio on the Lake. This is Cuckoo Clock part number 3 of probably 4 or 5, probably a 5-part series. There's a little preview of what it's going to look like at the end of this video. Had some microphone trouble. I've recorded this voiceover 5 different times, finally changed the USB cable out, and life is good again, I think. If so, you'll hear this. So I'm laying out the branch that goes left and right across the front of the cuckoo, of the clock, and drawing in the pattern of what I want the branch. The branch is going to have a bird nest in the center of it, just kind of like the original clock that I made out of that elm that's unstable and never finished several years ago. And I'm just getting my cut lines in where I want to take this over the bandsaw. So to give you a little better example of that, here it is redone in black. And there's the bird nest where it's going to be in the center. So it was cut out on the bandsaw. I've now placed it on the clock where I want it. And I'm going to go ahead and rabbit these cuts out so this thing sits down a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit proud of those two branches on the left and the right. Burning in the stop cut lines. And I'll take those out, and then I'll relief the back side of that branch the same way. It's interesting. I jumped in on Jordy Johnson and Just Car Fusion on his live broadcast, and it was kind of fun. I was able to sit in there for a few minutes and chat with him and some of the other folks. If you get a chance, check out these other carvers. Certainly Jordy over at Carving Fusion for sure. I'll put some links down there. Just Carve Rob. Some of the other folks I follow are Doug Linker, Stennett Sticks. And there's a bunch of other ones. I think in the next one I'll go ahead and give a shout out to a lot of those folks. We got a pretty good little carving community going, and if you like some of the other stuff that people are doing, by all means watch their videos, subscribe, help them out, support their channel a little bit. I've switched to a knife. I want this bottom to be kind of flat. It's just easier to do with a bench knife. It's a Ramelson bench knife. It's the one I always use. Well, I shouldn't say the only one. I use several different knives, but this one happens to be my current favorite. I think this thing's going to end up at 5 parts when I'm all done. I haven't done a lot of the detail work. I'm not doing a lot of detail work today. This is more putting the whole thing together. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that it's not wide enough in the center there to get that nest out the way I want it. So here I'm going to lay out a chunk that I'm going to glue to the front of that. As most of you know, I've got a lot of basswood that I collect basswood trees and split them and dry them out in a shed out here. And I just collected 7 new trees, probably, keep me in basswood for several years. I've got a whole shed full of it right now that would probably get me through the next 5 or 6 years, but so on. So I cut that out and glued it on the front to get a little more relief. I could have taken it out of one piece of basswood. I'm not worried about wasting it because I've got that much, but this piece right here was not basswood. This is a pine board that I pulled out of the wood pile, and it's going to become the roof. I took the board, it was about 1 inch thick, and ripped it in half. I didn't have the sections of basswood that I have out here in the studio right now were not wide enough to get this whole roof out. And I didn't feel like going all the way out to the shed, so I grabbed a piece. And I'm kind of happy with the way it turned out. It got a little bit of a curve in it, which I like the looks of. And that roof was put on with 10-minute epoxy. There are probably 4 brads that I shot down through there with a nailer. You can see the nailer laying in the background. There's the front piece that's finally dried with that 5-minute epoxy. And here I'm just getting a rough out on it. I'm rounding it over and removing a lot of wood real quick. That's an old DeWalt grinder that I've had around forever. You'll notice I don't recommend you use this. It's got a 36 grit sanding disc on it, and it removes some wood quickly. You'll notice that I use that one-handed, and also the other thing you might notice is it has no guards on it. I don't recommend you do that. I take the guards off all my angle grinders primarily because I used to use them or use several of them for metal work when on my old car restorations, and the guard annoys me. It gets in the way when I want to do something crazy, and that's come over to this. You see that blue electrical tape on the back of it? That's because the cord is starting to fray. I used to have an old one of these many years ago that had no switches left, a cord wired on it. It didn't have a switch. It had a cord that you had to wrap around your foot, and if you wanted to unplug it, just complete safety nightmare. Buddy mine and I wrote to DeWalt and sent pictures of it. They sent me probably this grinder right here, and they thought it was interesting that we'd abused that grinder so much. I am a big fan of DeWalt tools. I don't know that they're any better than others. It's just that that's what I like, and that's what I've gotten used to using over the years. So the bird house, or the bird nest, is roughly contoured there, as with the rest of the stuff on the house at this stage. I'm doing the rough carve out and layout and getting the whole concept pretty much down. If you're trying to build a birdhouse, a cuckoo clock is exactly like a birdhouse. Also, if you want to make a spoon or a kuska, which is a fancy drinking cup for outdoorsmen that you carve out while you're out in the woods. Same concept right here is this bird nest. You're making a bowl. You can do it with a power carver, obviously. You can do it with a pocket knife. You can do it with a spoon gouge or just regular gouges. But the concept is the same, whether you're making a spoon or making this crazy bird's nest. This is going to get detailed later on. I'll carve in the actual nest, sticks and twigs and that sort of stuff, and the whole thing will get, the whole clock will get finished. I'll actually do a professional finish on this one. I won't bother you. I'll put one video together after I get it all put together, where I go back and do a little bit of the detail work and then the finish work. So you'll get to see me putting all the little pieces together on this thing. I wanted to lay the whole video out for you, or the whole video series out for you, so you can see where I'm going with this, and then not necessarily watching me finish each individual piece. I think probably when I'm done with this, there'll be 25 or 30 hours in it, I suspect. So there's the nest. There's the relief on the back of the branch. Again, rough carved, as is I did a little more work on the face there, as you can tell. But that will get more detailed work. In fact, the whole thing will be refined. I made I opened my mouth and said I could do the letters by cutting them out with a scroll saw, that being a hand saw, a jeweler saw, out of some old piano ivory keys I had in Roman numerals, and several comments of like, well, man, I'd like to see that. Hey, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. So at some point, I think I kind of bought into having to do the letters too. That's more along the lines of inlay work, like guitar inlay or that sort of thing. It's a pain in the ass because you're cutting on a V block, and I'll have to work over at the bench to do that. But I think I'll do that. There's a bird that I carved several videos ago. I think the name of it's Baby Bird, and he's been sitting over on the table to the right of my carving station, and I'm just using him to test that out. But the more I look at him, the more I like him. And I think if I carved one to fit in that nest, it would look exactly like this one, or relatively close. So I might stick with this guy here and finish carving the nest. Interesting thing about cuckoos is they don't raise their own young. They lay their egg in another bird's nest, and then they fly off and abandon it. And then those other birds end up raising the cuckoo, and a lot of times the cuckoo is bigger than the real bird, and they end up starving out the others, and the birds are not smart enough to know. So that's all glued on with 5-minute epoxy roll. I set that off on the side. On the left and the right of this clock are the two vertical branches that go up. This is going to be an overlay that goes on it. It's going to be composed of leaves, a bunch of grapes, which you can see me drawing in right now. And then it's so thick, and the reason it's thick is I am going to cut this out on the bandsaw, on the profile, and then split it in half, open it like a book, and mirror image the left and the right. I lightly sanded off my initial layout lines because I wanted to do a little bit more detail. That was kind of like a scribbling. I was watching Jordy do some carving today, and he was going as he was drawing those circles, and it works. It works out better. I'm just kidding. But this is the leaves as they're going down, and once again, this is a rough layout. I don't know why I went back and did all that doodling in there. Like I say, I only changed one section on that. So there it is, cut out the profile of the bandsaw and open it like a book. Flip that over, get a mirror image. So that's going to go on the face of the clock. And this is the initial first one I drew was the right hand one. You can see it's sitting a little bit proud up above that branch. That's because this thing is going to be really carved down quite a bit. I mean, almost to a delicate stage. And then I'm going to end up splitting it down to go over that branch, and I'll show you what that does later on. I'll talk about it a little bit. But there's another section getting ready. On this one, you're going to see me come down, and it's about an inch thick, give it maybe a little bit short. But up at the top there, the little nub sticking out in the center is the start of a leaf stem. And I'm going to put different levels on these. I'm just going to work out kind of an outline on each of these leaves. At the top there are 3 leaves there. I know it's hard to tell. That one I just drew the circle on is 1. There's one to the right underneath my thumb, and there's one that hangs down into the grape bunch. There I'm working on the part of the second leaf and just getting different levels established. I'm going to go back and finish that one particular leaf up on the upper left-hand corner and let you see how I do that. And then I will do the grapes, not to completion, but to a point where you can actually tell what the hell they are. The rest of it I'll carve off camera. Right there I'm cutting those little nubs off. You notice I didn't notice that on the band, so I didn't finish the cut. But I did have the one cut going into each of the grapes. And it was just a simple matter of taking that cut saw on the 40,000 RPM and knock them off rather than get up and go back over to the bandsaw. So continuing down, establish the different depths. I want to have this kind of a 3-dimensional or rather than just a 2-dimensional look. And each of these leaves will have a flow that goes down where they are. You can give it a little more. And like I said, this is going to be really, I'm going to relief the back of this and carve this down quite a bit. I won't do that until last because the pieces will be fairly delicate. And there's nothing more frustrating than spending a couple hours carving on something like this and breaking it at the end. So this is just the rest of the initial setting of the levels, I guess, for lack of a better reference. This is run about 4 times the speed, which I normally do. I usually go 3 or 4 times. 4 is about as fast as you want to go. This first one's going to be the easy one to do. And I'm starting to put in the grapes now. I'm just laying them out real quick, and I'll come back and do the detail and show you that. So here's the ruby bit that I like to use a lot. It's a flame, ruby flame, and I'm actually carving that leaf down. You can start to see, or should be able to see when I'm done with it, where it's going. It won't be, like I said, 100% finished, but you can see what the rest of it's going to kind of look like beforehand, and how much work's going to go into each of these leaves. And that is just one leaf that I'm working on right now. You can see it kind of flows off like a leaf would. Leaves are not flat in the plane. And if you look at the side of it here, there's the side, there's the relief work in the back. And the rest of that's going to go all the way down. So now I've clicked to a saber burr. Those are the two that I use, Cutsalls and sabers. The sabers I typically use on the smaller 32nd in the small handpiece, and the others I believe are 1/8 inch that I use in the blue handpiece. I run both of those so I don't have to switch collets back and forth. And now I'm just cutting out and reliefing individual grapes, and then run down and do that. Initially, as I was watching back through this, I was thinking, gosh, a guy could do a bunch of grapes, a carving of a grape bunch sitting on the table or something. Then it dawned on me, to show you how old I am. The 60s and 70s, I don't know if you remember, they had these big resin grapes and fruit that were on tables. They were made out of the same stuff. Remember those knocker balls that you had? You had a big glass ball about an inch and a half around on a string, V string, and you held it at the top and you clicked them back and forth and banged them up and down until you hit someone else in the head with them or knocked yourself in the head with them. They weren't necessarily safe, and that's probably why you don't see them anymore. But they were great fun. You could annoy the hell out of people with those. All the adults click clack, click clack, click clack, and they smack together. If anybody remembers what the name of those things were called, leave me a comment in the comment section. Hey, while I'm farting around with this, putting this detail in here, as always, go over and check out some of the other carvers. Some of them I follow, a little group that I hang out with. Jordy Johnson over at Carving Fusion, Just Carve Rob is picking it up. All their styles are different. You can look at Doug Linker's stuff. He's a caricature carver. And Mike over at Stennis Sticks does some beautiful work. He's not as prolific a carver as the rest of us, but his work is awesome when you look at it. Also, Gene Messer, who's a caricature carver, has been for years famous for his caricature carvings. He made a shout out to this studio on the lake and said you guys should come over and look out. So if anybody came over from Gene's recommendation, thank you. Same with Rob at Just Carve Rob, and also Jordy. I know a lot of Jordy's folks are following my stuff now. So right there where my finger is, I'm going to end up probably cutting that when I carve those leaves and let it flow over that bottom branch. It'll make sense when I do that, but other than that, it's going to be standing proud. So right here, this is my older micro carver from PJL Enterprises over in Minnesota. I know a lot of folks are buying the little micro carvers now that are on Amazon. They look like the same handpiece. To me, I think probably those handpieces were made in China or something, and they're all starting to look alike. It's difficult to, without tearing them apart, to figure out what's inside. But I suspect those will probably work. This one's 20 plus years old, and I just had new bearings a couple of years ago put in it by the people over in Minnesota, PGL. The carver I use is Ultima, and it's lesser known. It's not as well marketed, but I love the heck out of it. I wouldn't change it for anything. It's also a burner microcarver combo, and I've ended up with 2 of them, having bought the new one, and I love that. I got 2 pens set up, wood burning pens set up to run, and 2 carvers, one with a 32nd bit in it and the other with an 1/8. And those are primarily the 2 burrs I carve with. I don't carve with the big 1/4 inch anymore. I've got the material and the stuff to do that, but that's just too much for me, for the stuff that I've been doing lately. So this is got a ball bit on it, and it goes all different directions. It does need finishing when you're done. So the hard part's going to be duplicating this on the other side. I've got to mirror image that. I'm looking to see if that's oriented the right way. It is. But the first one's easy because I carve what I want. And the second one, I got to duplicate that. So there you see how that's going to come together. And like I said, I will split those down, and I'll go over that branch at some point. So this is getting near the end of this carving here. There's what I'm talking about, right where I'm gonna split those out. And the next piece, which will be the last, other than a couple of birds that'll go in the middle and stick out, there's a piece that goes on the front of the hood or the roof there, and you'll see that in the next one. So like always, like, comment, subscribe, check out some of these other folks. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake. Thanks for watching.